Preparing to live stream the meeting. So it's going to take just a few seconds. And there. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is so nice to say all that in one go, considering that we have our esteemed guests from different parts of the world, where, of course, because of being located at different parts of the world, we have different time zones. So I would say good morning to our gentlemen from UK. Good afternoon, I would say, to myself and people from Pakistan. And good evening to Will. And I think I have covered mission with the morning part with UK. So good morning, gentlemen. Thank you, Razabai, once again for coming on our program. We call Point to Ponder. This is our fifth episode in collectively, and 4 episodes of ours have already gone live through our platform that we call the Grey Lounge. The Grey Lounge is a platform we term as a school of freedom of thought, a school where we give thought the respect that thought deserves, of course, within the confines and the boundaries of freedom of speech. We tend to bring visions and missions and thoughts and also programs and projects and concepts to people. And the whole purpose behind all this is to somehow improve the standards of life in general for everyone on the planet, regardless of their color, their location, their citizenship, their names, and their beliefs. So this is what the whole concept is. And in this series of Point to Ponder, so far we have covered a few topics which are of concern to everybody all over the world, although they are specified concepts and projects for specific areas. But over the past few weeks, we have come to know through Will's discussions that these projects could easily be replicated in all parts of the world, wherever there is a requirement to eradicate the problems that we face, like poverty, and also to put the environmental blessings of the Lord to the right use by means of the discussions we had regarding the agroforestry and various other topics that we have so far covered. And in continuation to that, today we are bringing another interesting topic, which is of a personal interest to me because of being a citizen of Pakistan, and this project is actually for Pakistan, and for that and the details of that project, I will request Razabai to take over from here and introduce the team and the project in his own very wonderful style that he has.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Zubi. First of all, welcome everybody once again. It's just truly, I'm just truly privileged to be here again and bringing our wider team together today, or part of the team that we're working on. I know that we've touched upon the project previously, the project being the Islamabad Global Leisure City project, which we intend to bring. So I'd like to give a little bit more detail about what the project is, how it came about, the team members that we've incorporated within it, and because it has generated a lot of interest already. You know, I've been asked lots of questions about it, so I thought collectively we will share some of the answers on here today. The idea basically came about once again wanting to be able to deliver something for Pakistan, something truly unique, truly iconic, something that nobody else has anywhere in the world. And for that, we obviously gathered a very specialized team, which you'll hear from briefly. But this city complex project is where we want to actually make it truly green, truly sustainable, self-sufficient in its existence. So from everything from food security to power to water, and of course, job creation, where was paramount to it. The housing aspect is paramount to it, but we just truly want to give a unique, world-class facility to Pakistan. For this, if I can bring in Fred Davey, who will explain how the team is and what the team has come about. Fred, if you could briefly give, and I mean briefly, please, because I know that we could be here for the whole duration of the project, about your background first, and then how the team came about, how we gathered everybody together for this purpose.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. Yes, hello everybody. My name is Fred Davey. My specialism in this project is actually bringing small businesses into the mix of the development. The instigator of the whole program, Will Marcus, focusing on the ecological poverty elimination and other aspects. We all agree that it must include small businesses in and around the area, and those that will grow up in the area from the people that will reside and take up work within the project. And my role previous to this, my expertise were as a business ambassador to the London 2012 Paralympic Games, where businesses within the most poverty areas in London, the East London, were, how could you say, brought in to benefit from the works in those games. Not just building the games and then off you go, but our project is to bring them in, to train them, to give them work, but also on a sustainable basis, long term, the maintenance, the recoup, the refurbishment, so on and so forth. The team, its origins date back to meetings in a place called the D Group in London's West End, which is taken up with loads of very blue chip high companies. And from that, people like Sir Peter Hall, Professor Harry Thomason, Arthur Purcell, these were giants in their own fields from across the world, all got together and decided that they would input their speciality into providing a social, ecological approach to development, which coincides very nicely with Will's. Yeah, so that brought Will in. Will was introduced to me by a young German guy called Tom Baker, who I should imagine, Tom Bauer, who probably isn't so young now. Anyway, that all said, in a nutshell, it's to bring in small businesses, train, educate them in works that will be needed within the development, both in the built and in the maintenance and ongoing. And certainly within certain aspects of the project, that will be, how can you say, refurbished every 3-5 years. Any more than that, my other speciality is the contact to humanitarian funders. Admittedly, that isn't always a good thing because you get hound-dogged with all sorts of things, but hopefully that's enough of me. You'll probably hear more from me in the future, and if not, then I can't be doing my job right. So I'll go back to Raza. Thank you, Raza. Hopefully that was enough.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. If I may just add that although we're bringing all this Western input into the Pakistan market, we still want to maintain the Pakistan basis, the culture, the educational side of it, the whole architectural side of it. So it's important that it's not just a Western import, but actually retaining the whole beauty of the Pakistan establishment as well. If I can pass over to Will now to sort of expand upon the actual project itself and the design aspect of it, and explain a little bit more of how we are adapting the processes to fit the Pakistan market. Will, thank you very much. Please follow.
Thanks, Buzzer. Greetings, everyone. This is a very important project for us as a group, I think. In the first instance, but certainly Pakistan as a nation. Most of us have been working the best part of our lives to get to this point, you might say, building up expertises that will be applicable to creating a city. And I guess many people have heard the term green city before. It's a term that's bandied around a lot. And you could argue that this is a green city, but I think that understates it tremendously, because most green cities fail dismally at the scientific definition of green or sustainable. Prefer to look at this as a sustainable city. Certainly greenery is a big issue, but we're aiming to, so firstly, the response for the whole city came about because of Prime Minister Khan's call to house 5 million families in Pakistan. And of course that garnered a lot of international interest. And so then through Raza, we sort of came together to find out what was going on. And I immediately started investigating solutions that might be useful in Pakistan. And what Raza said before is so very true. This is not a bunch of colonials rocking up to create what we think is the perfect city. It's exactly the opposite of that. We've got a model together which is kind of mature, but part of the process, and that this next process hasn't commenced yet, is to do a very deep delve into Pakistan history, culture, religion, climate, topography. Basically, it's the encyclopedia of Pakistan as we can get it into our heads as fast as we can. It helps to understand then where we are and what we're doing and who we're doing it for. And it's important to understand why we're doing this too. We're doing this because there really hasn't truly been a new city model that's been perfectly functioning on a sociological level. Many of them function technically or climatically, but the sociology of city design is quite important to us. And so it's not possible to walk into a culture and create a place where people are going to live, work, recreate, worship, and think you're going to get it right if you base it on what you already know. And so there's a lot of learning yet to be done. And for the last, is it 2 years, I think, we've been accumulating as much information as we can on Pakistan. I've got a small library forming at the moment, and I try and read as much of it as I can, but there'll be a moment where that has to be digested properly. And unfortunately, as my role as master planner and architect, I have to absorb all the data. I'm a bit like a fuse box. I get all the information in, I process it, and then I'll put out a pattern that comes out of that. But the pattern has to elegantly fit with the way Pakistanis want to live. And it's probably easiest to illustrate my point by telling you something that didn't work, and then I think you'll get my point, that often planners will move in. So let's just say we're in Africa, and they'll design a whole lot of landed property, like houses on blocks of land with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, and expect that that's going to work, not understanding that the traditional family format may well have 17 to 28 people in it. Once you have the mum and the dad, the grandparents, 2 sisters and a brother and their family, and a bunch of children, suddenly you've got, and that's a natural family unit. whereas I think most of us come from or are aware very much of the nuclear family, which is an advent of the 1950s out of America, which is just mum, dad, and the children. And that is not a natural format for habitation. Creates a whole lot of sociological problems like childcare, petty crime, postnatal depression. A whole lot of issues are born from that format. I'm not fond of it. I wish in my country, in Australia, we'd revert back to the original format. So my grandparents and my parents lived in an extended family format. I was lucky enough to remember my grandmother living with us when I was very young. And I think that's a natural format, and I think it's dominant in Pakistan at the moment. And because we're not here to show you how to do things better, we're here to observe how you do it now and create as much comfort and transition, because if it's been working for 1,000 years, who are we to suddenly change it overnight? I think that's probably the most elegant way of putting that. So we're pretty keen to understand the way that Pakistani communities connect with each other, their greater family groups, and then with their community, non-blood related community people. And so this all ties in with some theory that I've been working with and some practice in city design, and it's based around human genetics, and so that's immutable. And it's why villages all over the world all look very similar, not architecturally, but in the way they're formed, the way the connections between peoples are formed. And so we know that about 300, that any human generally on the planet has a capacity to remember 300 to 350 names. And that would generally relate to your marriage and blood connections. So if you think about all your cousins and uncles and aunts and their children, that's about 300, 350 in most peoples. And so that forms a natural cluster or clan grouping. And so villages form around that number of people quite easily. Now that clan know that they can't intermarry because there's bloodline issues. And so the next genetic marker is the number of faces that we can recognize, and that's in the order of 1,200 faces. And if you think about this and relate it back to your school days, I think you'd probably recognize that you probably could recall during school 300 names. Now it's a little harder because of technology. We're talking to so many people, but essentially these are true genetic markers. They stand up no matter where you test them. 1,200 face recognitions is your community. If you can recognize the people in your community, there's a sense of safety, and also there's a sense of security. That if you don't recognize someone, then you can identify them and say, "Can I help you?" Or "Are you looking for someone?" And so you can engage with them. But if you know them, you can wave to them and say hello. Even if you can't remember their name, you know who they are, so you can just say hello, which is what happens here in communities. And so small communities in Australia behave very much like a community. They know everyone in it. And so it's important to recognize that these are functional forms of human habitation. And what's happened since the 50s is like conurbations, often created by vehicles, by cars or trains, but generally cars, where you have to get into a car to go anywhere. And so the number of people you can fit into a community goes through the roof. You can get 30, 50, 100,000, 200,000, 1 million people. And so you don't know anyone. And at that point, you stop recognizing the 1,200 and you just revert back to whoever's living in your household and perhaps your neighbor. And so that's not good for society because the stress levels go up, depression goes up, medication goes through the roof. Things like postnatal depression are sort of sleeping giants. They really impact families in a huge way, particularly if they can't have connections to grandparents who can look after babies and children or do the shopping or do the cooking when mum is sort of overtired from birth and looking after a baby. So all of these sociological problems are solved if your community is intact you've got connection to your blood relatives, and you know the people around you, and so there are a lot of social ills that fall in, all sorts of strange behaviours if there's not the modifying influence of people recognising who you are. So you're less likely to spray paint a tag on a building if you know that half the people know who you are. That's not smart, but it controls a society naturally. So we're looking at that pattern, 350 and 1200, and out of this we created a model where we had clan groupings around a little village square of 350 people. It's not homes, it's people. And so if there were 7 people in each family, then there's 50 dwellings, or if there's 10, there's 35 dwellings. So these are not big clusters, but they create a real small community, and then we cluster them around a bigger area, which is like a village square, to get to the 1200. And so that the 1200 people, and we will stretch that out to 2000, forms the basis of a community which is intact, has a sense of community, and therefore is self-governing in many ways, certainly in terms of their behaviour socially. They're happier, and therefore they're also healthier. So all these things go together, and if we're trying to create a community that functions properly, we have to observe these very primary, essential genetic markers. Now, this is influenced a lot by the specific community that we're involved with. So the number of people who are expected to live in each dwelling is quite specific, and so we'd be looking closely at that. Sometimes it's socio-economic factors come in because of that. And I'd like to sort of make it very clear that we're not designing a city for the super rich, and we're not designing a city for the poorest of the poor. What's important is that we've got a mix. Like all cities have a socio-economic mix. You have people who are wealthy and poor and everything in between, because as a friend of mine keeps reminding me, who's going to polish my boots and iron my newspaper? Like you need to have you can't expect everyone to be doing, be the managing director of a major corporation, for example. So you have to look sensibly at this. Everyone has a preferred way of living or a capacity, and so you have to accept that. Not everyone's going to be at the bottom of the pile or at the top. It's going to spread. And so the way we structure the communities is not to put all the poor people over here and all the rich people over here, though that does tend to happen a little bit. The idea is to make the community as homogenous as possible. So without trying to be a rabid socialist about the whole thing, it's just important that in a village, if I can just draw your mind to, say, a medieval village, there was always the baron, and their family had a nice house in town with the big doors right onto the piazza, and there was always the village idiot, and everyone knew them, right? But they were part of the community, and everyone looked after the village idiot. They realised he wasn't full bottle, and he needed help, and he was tolerated and looked after, and that's how communities should operate. And not everyone's going to be the same, but you need to not put people away in a drawer somewhere and then hope they go away. These people have to interact, and it's better for everyone if they're interacting at a high level like this in a community, particularly around the village square concept. So we intentionally make it like a medieval village, because that is a really strong model, and it's enduring, and it still operates in many countries where you have a village square, and around that is all the retail. This is where the village square is where you go to, you have your local church or mosque, surau, whatever size it needs to be. You've got the market where you buy your fresh food. You can buy bread there. You can meet, talk to people, be political. There's often an amphitheatre where people can have meetings, of village meetings. So that's a very important part. The Greeks call these things agoras, And an agora was an open air place to meet, buy food, do everything. This is where the community come. It's like the heart of the village. People come in and out every day. And so we've intentionally designed spaces like this throughout the city. And if you can imagine, we've got, I think we've got 33,000 homes. So we're looking for in the order of 250,000 people living in the city. And so you can imagine we're replicating this little village scenario many, many times. I think it's about 83 villages gets us to the population we need. So these obviously need to spread out. And what happens when you start spreading out these communities is that you have transportation issues. So you have to cluster your villages around little townships, if you like, outside of the city, so that a person could live and die in that little township without leaving. Now, that's not our intention. There's no barbed wire fences, of course, but the design intention is so that a person can walk to everything they need every day and not have to leave, unless they're into some obscure hobby and they need to buy a widget from the other side of the planet. They might want to jump in their car. But, you know, what I'm getting at is that the autonomy of each village or little township is important because it creates efficiency. If you don't have to jump in a car every time you need to go and post a letter or buy bread or go to worship, then look at all the diesel or petrol you're saving, or the energy, the time, or the road making that doesn't have to happen, because you can do it by foot, and also by moving around by foot, you're healthier, much healthier. And so there's less pressure on medical centres and hospitals. People live longer. A little bit of cardiovascular walking around will just make everyone better off. And that's known. It's not even contested in any way. So the model is to allow people to move around, do what they need to do without the need for a car. Now, that's not saying that there aren't cars in the city, because we would expect that every family would have at least one car. And it just means that there's one car you don't need to have. And so there's a bit of a financial elegance to this. If there is one car that a family doesn't need to have in a community, then in their domestic economy, their household, not having a car, and I don't know the figures for Pakistan, but in Australia, that's 35,000 Australian dollars a year that family doesn't have to spend on another piece of transport, because the average number of cars for an Australian family is 2.5, and the average number of people in an Australian family is 2.25. So figure that out. As people have more cars than they need here. But if you take a car out of the equation, then you save $35,000 a year. So 35,000 Australian dollars is about like 28,000 US dollars, just to help people understand parity. So if you don't have to earn that extra money to run that extra car because the city was planned correctly, then you take a bit of financial pressure off the family, and that'll just lead to more happiness. I can tell you, they can still work hard and collect that 28,000 US dollars a year extra and pay off their debts, maybe their mortgage faster. If they're out of debt, everyone's just happier, or they can make the decision to work less. It's really up to the family. And so, because they don't have to spend as much. So most people usually just keep working the same amount, get rid of the debt, and then feel wonderful, I guess is the only way of putting it. So the city has these mechanisms master planned into them. And I've only just mentioned one or two, but there are many of these that bring together a super efficient city. So this is like the perfect engine, if you like, though we're always polishing it and trying to make it better and better. And so it's important to understand that the economy of a city is based on kilojoules. And so it's all about energy. So the less energy it takes to run a city, the more efficient it will become, the more likelihood that it will be successful and last a long time, make everyone happy. So it's all about kilojoules, and I don't want to go into a long discussion about the energy components of how cities operate, but if something is efficient, it's better. I think we all understand that. And so that goes a long way to being sustainable. So if a city is consuming, say, a gigawatt instead of 3 gigawatts, then obviously there's 2 gigawatts we don't have to generate in energy to make it function. And that the gigawatts could be in terms of electricity or physical labor or food input. These things are sort of reduced. It just makes everything run very well. So I guess what's exciting, certainly me and everyone here, about the nature of this city is that this will probably be the first opportunity to do a really, really functional, sustainable city like no one has ever done before, because we have time to do this upfront consideration, work it out properly, interface with Pakistan culture, religion, sociology, and make sure that we have a good fit. Now, nothing will be perfect, but what I've learned over the years is that humans are very resilient, and they'll sort of make the final 15% adjustment themselves without too much damage. But we're trying to get an 85% solution here so that people will come into a city and want to own it and live it. And I tell you, most cities that are designed barely reach a 50% fit with the sociology of the people who want to be there. In fact, most of them are quite damaging, and there are many, many examples of that. So apart from just the sociological planning, how that operates, we're also looking very much at environmental issues. And so most definitely this is a zero carbon facility. That's very easy for us to do. No one's done a zero carbon city yet. It's being built. It's nice to talk about it, but doing it's another thing. Zero energy in and out. So we'll be creating the energy that we need within the city and probably exporting energy. So we're not going to be a drain on Islamabad. And the same with water. We're going to create enough water for the agriculture to feed 250,000 people and for general daily use, industrial and domestic. Now, that's a tall order, and we have technologies about that, or I won't speak about them just yet, that will allow us to do that. And that's a very exciting part about what we're trying to do here, is that the technologies that we are working with are leading edge. And I want to make a distinction between leading edge technologies, which have had some track record but aren't generally implemented, and bleeding edge technologies, which sound fantastic, and then when you implement them, they fail or cause havoc, or there's something no one considered and they don't work. So we're working with some very interesting technologies, and so for me, that I have a fascination with how to implement these technologies, some of which are quite threatening to existing industry, and how we implement them without harming the status quo. Because our intention when you bring in a new technology is not to wipe out a whole industry by creating something better, but to partner with it until such time as everyone in that, say it's an energy industry, everyone in that industry has migrated across to the better, more functional platform. And so I think, Zubi, next week we're going to have a discussion specifically about implementation of threatening technologies into society without creating havoc. I look forward to that talk with my partner Sergei Karabut. But and then the other aspect of this city, there's so many aspects of this city. You're going to have to stop me at some stage. But one that I really like is that that it became apparent that Raza, you were doing the global leisure entertainment city. It was a movie world and a convention center and the water theme park and you're doing this.
Touching on the water theme park, Will, you gave a great explanation a couple of months ago when we were talking with the government guy what the water theme park were, because water theme park, and I'll bring Fred into this as well, but you know, there's several water theme parks around the world, some all at different sort of scales of entertainment. But what we're looking to do here is once again so unique, where we were talking about the whole gaming aspect of it, having the Olympics of gaming held annually or every 2 years, biannually. And maybe you could just touch upon your explanation, because you said it, you know, it was a cross between the film Mandalorian and Avatar, and all incorporated and brought into this new water theme park.
Yeah, okay. Well, let me just talk about the hub of the city. So all of these townships or villages wrap around a CBD, a central business district, which in itself is a donut shape. And in the middle are these attractions, or we call them in planning magnets. They attract people. So a water theme park, and I will come back to that, Rosa, the convention centre and the movie world, these are all big employers, but they're also big magnets. So they bring people in from other places to come and visit your city. Mm. And in doing so, they light up a whole lot of industries like tourism, accommodation, hotels, and all the service industries, food and beverage, restaurants, cafes. It all suddenly becomes very viable, let's put it that, in a financial sense, but also sociologically, because to make a city operate, you need input of people coming in from outside to spend money in your city and move out again, because that input refreshes, it offsets exchanges that you have in the opposite direction financially. But it brings life to the city, and so the CBD in this project is surrounded by green belt. Now, this is an active green belt. So if you can imagine the most beautiful botanical parkland and sprinkle it with golf courses and amphitheatres and cafes selling ice cream and juice and, you know, gelati, whatever, places to promenade, to walk your dog, or not walk your dog, it doesn't matter. I know this can be a cultural thing, but ride your bicycles, be fit, ponds and rivers and streams, forests. That belt surrounds the city, and there's a purpose in that it limits the growth of the city, and that's intentional. Most cities don't have limits, and they just start to sprawl, and they take over other areas, and it gets very messy. And I don't have an aversion to mess. I think chaos can be good at times. But the problem with that is that you lose sight of this sociological imperative that comes out of our DNA, of the numbers of people that you can support in a certain way. So the CBD is a function of the number of people who live in the dormitory townships and villages around it. So it can't get bigger. And in the same way that we would surround the city with a lovely parkland that people can enjoy, it's also a green lung. It does help with, you know, the health and the environment generally. Yeah. What it does then is that it helps to, you know, then we have a donut of, you know, residential areas around that, and it's surrounded by a green belt, so it is also limited. And that green belt gives some room for some expansion, but it's limited, because we know what the limitation of a township like this is before it becomes a megalopolis and sociologically useless. But the green belt is where we grow the food, and where people play cricket, and all things like this. You know, have to have playing fields, and so they take up a huge amount of space, and so that surrounds the city, and everyone has equity of access to all of these sporting facilities and green areas, and then the farmers can bring the food into the city easily. Doesn't have to be transported hundreds of kilometres to get to the place of sale, which means the food's fresher and it probably hasn't been refrigerated for too long, which is a good thing. Okay, so back to the water park, Raza, your question about, you know, how that is. And this is kind of true of everything. We're rethinking everything. We don't want to just make the assumption that it's going to be the same as, that there's a model over there, we're going to copy it. I think that's lazy thinking. And you can often perpetuate problems, usually sociological, sometimes financial problems from other places, and implant them into your project, and that just creates havoc with your whole system. And then you've got to rely on smart people inside the city fixing it later. Well, that's not the plan. The plan is to make things new, fresh, fitting, and novel. That will help people be attracted to them, but that also means we've got a layer of thinking going in there that makes it appropriate. Very important that these things are appropriate. So we know, say, for the water park, and this is an idea we've been playing with for a while. In fact, for 40 years, it's been in the pot cooking. This one, it's hard to sort of lay it down because until quite recently, the technology required to make this happen didn't exist or was so expensive that it wasn't viable. We nearly had the Japanese over the line about 30 years ago with this. Mitsubishi was going to sponsor it, and we had holographic projectors, and it was all good. So, but the Japanese economy fell down at that time. I think the yen halved in value and interest rates doubled, and they had to bail out on the project. So we're at a point now where technology is meeting the need. And so what we're trying to do is we've done a lot of water theme parks in the past, and they're wonderful attractions because everyone can use them. Grandma, toddlers, young, fit people, middle-aged people, families, everyone can enjoy a water park. There's always a part of it you can use. And so I would like to think that this water park is more like a country club with a lot of water in it. And so it's designed for people to come and spend the day comfortably and not be forced to eat hot dogs and meat pies or inappropriate food. It's designed to be where you want to go with the family because it's lovely and it's easy and it's not overly expensive. So that's the first thing. There's a water park aspect. There's an interesting thing. If everyone spends at least visits a swimming pool or a water park once a week, it's almost impossible to have eye problems of any sort, cataracts, corneal damage, myopia, because the bacteria that cause all these problems around your eyeballs are affected by the disinfected water so much that they can't form. There's been some interesting studies done on that. So it's also a health aspect. And if you're moving around and swimming, every part of your body is moving. And so, again, it's a health thing. We're lifting everyone's health up. So there's this water park aspect that we want to do. And we want to do it in the form of as a historical precedent we want to pick out of Pakistan that is a grand old building with lots of layers and levels, and we build the pools around it. I guess the Mughal Empire is quite inspiring and I think possibly quite appropriate because of the architectural style, its precedents in Pakistan. The beauty of Pakistan is there's just so many precedents to select from because you've been the crossroads of the planet for so long that everything is seated there. But I do like the Mughal Empire for the beauty of the architecture and the ponds. And so that's likely to be the format, lots of verandas and courtyards, wrapping around. So there's the water park, but not in the sense that you think of Disneyland water parks, a kind of a ball, a nasty plastic themey stuffy. It's like, why can't it just be normal and natural, and delightful? And you can do a lot of things with water and still have wave pools and lazy rivers and all of these, but do it in a way that it's architecturally really lovely. And then the other aspect of the water park that we're going to bring in was so you've got all the children exercising and being fit, and that's great. And then we've been noticing for, decades, really, children sitting at home, and I've got a couple who are now adults, but just sat at home and for 20 hours a day, they would kill zombies or, run around with weaponry or killing orcs or something in Avatar worlds, getting very good at it and gaining points, but very addictive sort of behavior. And they get very sedentary. And so, fitness levels go down. So you have to be careful of that in society, that everyone doesn't become a potato as they're doing this, particularly our children. So I thought, how do you integrate these two things? And then, of course, what's happened over the last 20 or 30 years is esports. If you're not familiar with esports, that's where kids and young adults, and sometimes not so young adults, will sit down at their computer. They'll go into these avatar lands and they will battle against other teams. And it's a very big thing. In fact, it attracts more visitors than Super Bowl in America. It's huge. And there is prize money. A team will fight another team in this created world in a virtual reality. And the winning team will take home $1 million each. And so the prize money is huge. And so you can imagine the kids are battling for this. So it's attracted most of the children on the planet who have access to a laptop and the internet and a bit of software. They're all into it. So I thought, okay, how do you capture that? So we integrated a system where the avatar land is a virtual overlay on a real landscape. And the real landscape is designed in such a way that it is as fascinating as, say, the movie Avatar. Or if you're not familiar with that, what's another fascinating landscape? I can't think, but almost surreal, very interesting. So the people who are actually in the landscape can enjoy it physically, and then the virtual overlay can be enjoyed online. And into the physical landscape, we're building a whole lot of mechanical equipment and also electronic equipment that interacts with people who are online on the other side of the planet, who can create water squirts or mist effects or waves by the press of a button. They're interacting with the real landscape. And there are potentially teams of people moving through in real time through an obstacle course against people who are trying to make it more difficult for them, for example. There are a few scenarios we've generated. And so you have people sitting at home digitally interacting with people physically on site and coming up with results that you can score. We would prefer none of it to be combative. It's all about skills, which I think is sort of a healthy way of doing this, mentally healthy, not just physically. And, and I guess the outcome is, or we would hope, is that the people sitting at home would be encouraged to come to the site to actually see this real world and become that part of the real team rather than the virtual team. And so that would encourage visitation, but it also encouraged them to get off their seat and do something physical for a change. So that was kind of a background thought that I was having. But the whole notion of integrating digital and real sites only became possible when there were some devices created that use Bluetooth that can activate machinery that's embedded in gels or epoxies. Because in a marine environment, the machinery and the receiver transmitter equipment that we need to make all this happen would corrode and be gone within 12 months. And it'd be nonsense trying to report it. And wiring is a nonsense. Just wiring through the whole landscape would be insane. So now with all of this other types of technology, it's all possible. We have sensors that can interact through a mainframe back to into the cloud to everyone who's interacting with the location. So this is a whole new way of thinking about using a water park. And frankly, you don't even have to go to the water park to interact with it. You can be at the water park from your home anywhere on the planet. So we see this as a really interesting model. We're very keen to roll that out. And that's just the water park. So you can imagine what we're going to do with Movie World, Raza. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Will. Just a couple of points to clarify for the audience, if I may. Firstly, the title, Islamabad Global Leisure City, is currently just a working title. It's not the final version. Although we've incorporated Islamabad, it not necessarily means that it will be Islamabad or it will be within the boundaries of Islamabad. So it may well be south of Islamabad, somewhere a little bit more central. So that is just a working title at the moment. Secondly, we mentioned that we've been working on the project for 2 years, which we have, but there has been an interruption because of COVID, and we took a little bit of a sabbatical because of that and just waited to see what outcomes come. And we are now back in the groove and starting to work on it. So 2 years seems a long time, but not necessarily. You know, there has been other circumstances controlling this. And then, like I mentioned, 2 years is a long time. So I've kept the team updated with developments within Pakistan. You know, the goings on in Gwadar, up and down the country. So I always try and get information, whatever information I have, I relay it onto the team and just keep everybody updated on certain aspects, whether it be political, whether it be economical, and other developments that seem to be popping up all over the country. So I just wanted to sort of clarify those points. I know David has been sat through patiently listening in and making lots of notes. I would like to bring David Watham into the conversation now. David, if you could just share a little bit of your background and then how your role fits in with the project itself.
Yes, certainly, Reza. Thanks for the opportunity. My background's predominantly manufacturing and construction. I spent probably the first 20 years of my life or so, or working life, working in automotive and automotive related sort of industries. The type of places that had very rigorous processes and procedures and actually didn't harm many people in terms of accidents and incidents and injuries. Then I went to the world of construction, which was quite a shock in many respects. I mean, partly because of the relative lack of planning, which is why it was interesting hearing Will's words just then, because I couldn't endorse it any more strongly. The whole piece around planning is so critical, and yet we have so many clients, particularly here in Europe and the States, I know, who want people on site as soon as possible. And invariably, the faster you go to site, the less the results reflect what you really wanted. And I think that's a real key learning for us. So to say, my background the last few years has really been around construction and utilities, and within that, sort of the commercial side of things. So procurement, logistics, commercial contracting. But just to pick up a bit on that earlier comment, I'm not sure how many people, if everyone's familiar with the term of IQ and EQ, but the intellectual quotient and the execution quotient. It's interesting how lots of people seem to spend lots of money and time getting the IQ right, and then sort of leave the EQ to whoever else is left to, around the table. To me, I mean, they're both really important and they need to be sort of tied together. So that planning piece, I think, is really important. Get the project right from the outset. Stop making time-bound decisions. I mean, how often is the decision that you make because you have no other choice? How often is that really the best decision? Very rarely. So we need to make sure we give ourselves the opportunity to make the right decisions at the right time. And the other key thing, again, from my learning and having got it wrong in places, but really, really be passionate about making sure you use the data that's available to you to make the decision. Don't make the decision because it's the safe option or it's the one that everyone's done before. Make it because you think it's the right thing for the business and the opportunity. So coming more specifically to this project, and again, reiterating some of the earlier comments, I'm not from Pakistan, I'm not from that part of the world, I don't know all the culture, although it's been fascinating, as Will said, having the materials to read, the things that Raz has been sharing with us, it's been a great learning opportunity. I have been involved building factories in India, and I've been involved in engineering in India, which I know, again, we can make that big mistake of assuming things are the same and they're culturally quite different. So I'm acutely aware of that. But one of the key things from a, if you like, logistics, planning, procurement side of things, it's really critical to understand the local market. So the local market to us is really what materials are available locally, what skills are available, what technology is available, and also even things like climate. I was involved in Araha Beach in Abu Dhabi, and the extremes of climate there meant that we couldn't pour concrete during the day at certain months of the year because it was just too hot. So it's understanding those sort of things. The other thing about some of those projects, because of the size of them, we just couldn't build them using traditional methods because there weren't enough people to physically build. So we ended up building factories to build components, so component sets for precast concrete, that type of thing. So, I'm not presupposing what any of the answers are to this project, but we just have a process, if you like, that will help us to get to the right answers and the right decisions. The other thing that's critical to me, historically, people would do things in glorious silos. So you'd have engineers or architects who would, do fantastic pieces of work and then hand it over to somebody else to either manufacture or to procure or to engineer and to produce it. And oftentimes there would be some assumptions in those original plans that meant it was either impossible to make, or it was suboptimal to produce it, or there was a different material that would have been more suitable. And I guess probably 30 years ago, we started talking about simultaneous engineering. And it was really something that I think the Japanese car industry pushed quite heavily. But it really works. So actually, to have people who are going to be involved in the delivery of the project, working with Will's team or being part of Will's team is really important. So they can feed in there that sort of, whether particular materials are more readily available, they're cheaper, whether certain technologies are on the ground already. Those sort of things are useful. I'm not there to be the architect or the master planner, but if I can contribute to making some slightly more informed decisions, I think that is part of my role. Just on that point, I'm not, again, don't want to sort of start quoting buzzwords, but we always used to use a lot of things like RACI, which some people may or may not be aware of, but it was a really simple sort of list of who was responsible, who was accountable, who was consulted in the process, and who was informed. Because without that clarity, often you can have people that don't really have any responsibility making lots of noise in meetings. And we had this sort of expression when I worked in construction about you have a voice, but you don't have a choice. In certain things, people can say what they want, but you're not the person who's putting their name on the document. You're not the person responsible for it. So it's all noise, which sounds a bit harsh, but actually it helps to move things forward a bit more quickly. The other thing about understanding the local market also is if we can find more local materials, then we don't embed carbon in the project. We're not moving stuff huge distances. The other thing is around the planning piece, and it again sort of staggered me going into construction, but how many materials move onto site and then move off site in some sort of waste capacity, so we've ordered stuff which is either not the right stuff, or we've ordered it and we've damaged it in the manufacturing or the construction process. I remember, again, a project in London, taking photographs in these bins or skips that were being taken off site, and the site managers didn't believe that they had a problem. But when they're confronted with photographs of coils of copper wire and the price of copper being as high as it was, we would pay on average then about £250 for a skip. And we reckon there was about 300 to 500 pounds of the stuff actually in the skip. Well, the real trick wasn't to buy cheaper skips. The real trick was to not bring the stuff on site that we were getting rid of. So again, I think one of the things that a team like this can bring to a project is, as long as along with the grey hairs and wrinkles, it's the fact that we have got some real world experience that is equally as relevant in Pakistan as it is anywhere else. The other comment, really, I guess, is around communication. The projects that are successful are the ones that set out with a real passion to communicate, and that's communication on site to the team, to the functions. It's communication with the local community, helping people to understand what's being built in their environment. It's all too often where the local community is seen as the opposition, and there's this fraught tension. But actually, if you can get them involved from the outset, make them aware of what's going on, share the visions, hopefully they'll be supporters of it. And that's a really big thing for us. And I guess the other comment really around this sort of planning and process is, the more we can share what the visualization is of the scheme, to some extent, the more it will appeal to people. So, I think everyone's familiar with three-dimensional drawings. Some people can interpret them and understand them easily, others struggle. But with modern computer-aided drawing design, we used to do things like 4D and 5D presentations, and the 4D would be time. So we could say, well, this is what the building will look like week 1, week 2, week 3. So for our subcontractors, for the guys on site, you could understand how it was going to be developing. Also, from a health and safety standpoint, you could sort of describe where the main activities would be on the site. If you had slightly, I would say, more dangerous things, like scaffolding was always a problem on certain sites, you could explain exactly where it was going to be, what the time frame was, but also to then build in cost. So you can see where the big costs are going to be. You can see where you need to have real accountability on certain parts of the project. And I think that makes people quite excited to sort of to really understand what it means to them, what it means to their community. And then alongside that, hopefully that visualization helps us to attract subcontractors and people from the local community that either have the skills already or have the vision to want to be upskilled and trained and to fill that gap. So, you know, when I say that we want to sort of understand the local market, that's the first thing. But clearly also then we identify our specific needs for the project along the sort of time frame. And then really part of the challenge for me, I see, is exploring those gaps, you know, and filling those gaps. So you know, where do we have a need, but we don't have a solution? Because if we don't work on that quite quickly, that gap will remain. So hopefully I'm making logistics and supply and procurement sound quite exciting, because often it's kind of the bit at the end of the process that has to be done. But without the material, without the skilled labour, and without the sort of processes, unfortunately, that's where Will's great work sometimes can fall by the wayside. And I think it's an area that at the end of the project, we want to really passionately believe in leaving people with better skills, better capability, so they can go on and work on other schemes and projects in the vicinity. So hopefully that gives you a flavour for some of what I can bring to it, Raza.
Thank you very much.
Can I make a quick comment about some of the things that David's, because they're valuable, you know, and I really like it that David's background is in manufacture, which is kind of accidental but really important. We've been thinking about the architecture in two different ways. It's almost like we're almost having a meltdown in the office. Like we're going schizophrenic about the whole thing, because we know that Toyota and Ford and all these companies, they don't build cars, they manufacture them. They use robots, and they do around the clock production, and they use CNC cutters and robot arms, and the cars are assembled and it's a production line. And they don't do that because they don't do it because they can. They do it because it's cheaper and the quality's better. Like in the bad old days when you had to assemble a car, they were tremendously expensive. Only the super wealthy could afford them. Too much labour going in. And it's the same now. And with houses, we build them. You know, men walk around with belts on with hammers and tools hanging off them, and they wander around the place bringing materials in and out, and it's all bespoke and it's expensive. And so there's a real room to manufacture homes. And so we've been exploring this aspect for a while. And so it means that you get a better quality and you get it cheaper. So, you know, you can't really knock that. And then on the other side, we have this love for using local materials, as David said, the embodied energy of carting them all around the planet, you know, importing stone from Italy or whatever you're doing. That's just nuts. You know, you can't do that. And so we're always looking for the local materials and how is it done locally? And there's an added benefit to that. It means we can use local artisans who work within their skill sets. We design around the way they normally do things, but we lift it up a notch or two if we can, right? So that we get a better designed product, but using the skills that are available and the materials that are available, always a better outcome. And so we like both approaches. And I think we've come to the conclusion that you don't have to choose. I think we do both. And there'll be some areas that work with the vernacular materials and trades, and there'll be other parts of the city, because it's a big thing, can be modularized and manufactured and assembled. And then there's a net benefit in that, because we would have to set up a factory in the city specifically designed to manufacturing buildings. And so what does it do when the city is built? It keeps making buildings and selling them offshore. So we have an industry, not offshore, into other areas of Pakistan. So, or even other nations. So you end up with an industry, very healthy industry, who's selling great homes or great commercial buildings at a very reasonable price. So there's two things going on there. And David, your background in manufacture, I think you totally appreciate what I'm saying. And how do you get over the schizophrenia? I don't think a simple drug is going to fix this. We need to have a really good talk about how we integrate these two very different approaches. And like I said, the city is a big thing. There are very many parts to the city, and it's not necessary that we have to dictate. People can have options. I'm not going to tell people how to live or what to live in. We're going to encourage them in certain ways. So, but I like the idea of employing as many Pakistanis as possible in the job and using Pakistan materials. I think that's really worthy. And if we can't get what we want, then we can start a light industry, maybe like glass making and window making. We can start that industry in the city, and so it is enduring. And then we can get what we want because we've made it locally in the city as we're building the cities. We start the industries first. So this the organic growth of how we go about the planning and then the construction. It's very integrated, and the efficiencies that we can create by planning that properly and not taking an ad hoc approach. As you said, David, you know, most of the clients, they want a city now. We want it yesterday. If the machine's on the ground and then the planners are going, architects don't have a chance to put together the thing properly or even think about what the people who are going to live or work in it need, because it's all just about getting it drawn so it can be built.
Yep.
And I guess we can thank COVID for a bit of a breather, because that's really helped for me personally to mature ideas about this. But again, when we get into it properly, I'm really not interested in rushing. Let's do this properly once, get it right the first time. Anyway, David, thanks. They were really valuable thoughts, and I really look forward to working with you to integrate the planning and the architecture with the buildability issues. So
absolutely,
so critical.
The one killer in any process is variation. Sorry, as I say, variation is the thing that kills most projects. And if you can do things in a common way and have common processes, procedures, you eliminate variation, and that's a real challenge. So look forward to it too,
Will. Last but not least, if I can bring in Mushin, who last week gave a great insight into the Jala project, but maybe we can today how it would be incorporated within our project and how it can be used and expanded upon. So Mushin, if I could hand over to you, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, just for the purpose of this kind of staying in the stream, I just want to mention that I have built or developed, we would say, I've developed software for task management in the construction industry. So I've worked together with a person in the construction industry. So I'm extremely aware of all these major problems and difficulties that are that come about in the construction industry, and especially in building such a huge thing. Amazing. Anyway, so part of where I come from is from understanding complex, holistic problems, really, because task management is a holistic problem. So that's where I come from. Now, when I think about this city, and when we've talked about this global leisure city, which I really like that name. You know, it kind of makes me want to go to Pakistan and do some leisure, right? One of the things that causes so much stress and that we don't want to have in leisure city is over taxing bureaucracy, right? So bureaucracy is always a big problem. So what I realized then is that we're talking about the state and the government here. What do governments want? They want to make efficient regulations to help the people to do their things efficiently. And they have a problem is they need to give people jobs, and all these bureaucracies have their own life. Now, so that's one part. The government also wants taxes, which is the other part, right? So it wants money. And it would like to get that efficiently, but over time we have this kind of very strange growth of rules and regulations, and people discovering sophisticated schemes to avoid it, and then people discover, and so on. So an efficient, smart city needs an efficient, smart medium of exchange. And I mentioned all these other things, which are basically not really accounting problems or money problems, but they are actually. And if you design a medium of exchange smart, then you come to what I would like to happen in Global Leisure City, and what I could contribute is a way in which accounting and accountability are of the same cloth, so to speak. So if you want to buy stuff and you want to sell stuff, we usually take money or credit cards simply because it makes exchange easy. But what it also does, it makes exploitation easy. It makes loan sharking easy, etc., etc., etc. So what Jala is proposing here is that we don't even use currencies in the city. And not the cryptocurrency. We don't use currencies in the city because really what we're talking about is a bookkeeping problem. I owe you X, you owe another person Y, and that other person owes a third person epsilon. But basically, that's just can be done in a ledger, right? So if we have 100,000 people in a ledger, then we can easily take away probably half of the money that is wasted in exchange process, because we simply say, oh, it's +1 and -1, and then we put them together, it's 0, right? So we don't get these banking and financial problems through that gate. So that's one chapter. I mean, I think it takes a longer time to unwrap it, but it's one part. So let me give an example. So Global Leisure City, there is a water park, right? So I come from Islamabad with my family to go to the water park and then maybe stay stay a couple of days. And so if I come into the city, often cities have something like tourist cards, etc., to really get the data from the people visiting the city to understand how they behave and how the city could make some procedures more efficient. Now, if we just say there's a Jala card, we have, and everybody that enters the city gets the Jala card, and we have a whole process. We went into that a little bit last time, but everybody can get a Jala card and load it basically with credits, which are valuable in the city. Then you don't have to have a cash thing going. The money is really safe because nobody can pick it from your pocket. So you don't have pickpocket. So, like the pickpocket problem is really just a problem because people have things on them that pickpockets want to pick, right? So if we take the money out of that equation, we take a cause of criminality out of the equation. So that is another part. That's just the flow of money. Then if you have a valid, good ID, you can actually, you could do 80% of bureaucracy. You could do that electronically. So you can just connect these two items, like Estonia did it. I have here the Estonian, it's called e-residency. And basically I can found a business, I can pay my taxes, I can do everything just using this card, sticking it into a appropriate thing on my computer, and do all these things electronically. And we can take away tons of bureaucracy. So probably about 70% of the bureaucratic things can just be done digitally if you have a good identity. Now, as Global Leisure City gets, let's say, 20,000 visitors per week or per day or whatever, and I'm just taking a week now. That's, we'll get more, but I'm just taking that number. So imagine 20,000 people coming there, they get the card, and then they become transporters of the city's aura. Let's call it aura or essence or emanation, right? Because they will take that home. And they will start to think, why can't we do things so easy in our city? Because really, this card you can use to open the key in the hotel, to open your lock in the hotel, to enter the water park, etc., etc. And we can make this safe because we're using, as I explained last time, we're using a system that doesn't have centralized databases, so that any agent wanting to hack that that thing will maybe be able to hack my personal card and account, but that's as far as they will get because my account is just my account and it's sitting on my machine basically, and a few copies around people randomly, so it doesn't get lost. So you you get the identity problem solved with this, and you get the money problem solved with this. And so if we have that in economy, they always talk about zero margins or things going towards zero margins. Now, why not try that with bureaucracy? Why not try that with tax? So here is a suggestion that I am making about this. Now, this is just a suggestion, and it's just very rough, and it needs discussion with governments and other people. But basically, what I'm saying is we could simplify paying tax to the max. You don't even notice it. At the end of the year, you don't even have to do anything because living in this city, being a citizen of this city, with every interaction, the city just takes a very tiny part of that interaction, and that's the tax. And that's it, right? So VAT and all these things, they require a huge bureaucracy. This just would allow it. So let's say I pay $100 to the hotel, then the city would take $1 of that immediately at the moment of being paid, because we can make the app or the program in that way that that happens. So the city knows, oh, there's a person checking in for one night in hotel XYZ, and they don't know which person it is because that's none of their business really. And that's data that we shouldn't transport. What the city wants to know is how many people live in that hotel, how many people go to the water park, how many people use public transport, how many people, and all of these data we can have without touching on privacy at all. So what we are introducing in Global Leisure City is basically a a revolutionizing of the media of exchange and the way governments interact with that, allowing the people in Global Leisure City a maximum degree of freedom in their decisions on how they want to do their businesses, how they want to interact. And the city gets a maximum leverage, basically, for taking care of what is actually needed. So that's just the beginning, and I could go on and on and on. Like basically, it's the key to smart city. Smart cities, like Will always likes to say, don't exist. Well, Global Leisure City in Pakistan could be the first really smart city, because a smart city really just says, we'll just give you a smart infrastructure and we hope you act smartly with that. That's from my point of view. That's a smart city. It's smart citizens, really, that it's counting on. And it's counting on that citizens are smart. Now, the last part I want to shortly talk about is the way this could revolutionize how we handle construction investment or getting investments, basically getting investments. What we could easily do in a way with this system is saying, okay, people from all over the world, you can invest in Global Leisure City. You just put money in this particular thing, and then that is part of the city investment fund. And that would be the cryptocurrency you create, which is kind of a way that the city funds many things it would like to fund. It gives people in Pakistan an opportunity, and ordinary people in Pakistan an opportunity to put their savings in a place where it will actually work for them, and so on. And part of and parcel of that is really how poor people, because we want to help. I mean, I originally hooked up with Will about a way to eradicate poverty. We don't want to alleviate it. We want to eradicate it. And to eradicate poverty, one of the beautiful ways to do that is give people that now live in inadequate housing, the official word for slums, in inadequate housing, a way and an opportunity to actually buy apartment or their houses or places to live, basically. And we know a pretty good way to do that is, I don't want to go into that, but there's a really good and elegant way in which we can do that, and do that in such a way that the people don't need large loans that exceed their possibility and so on. So, what Global Leisure City, in my mind, also allows, in the sense that Imran Khan, your prime minister, talked about creating 5 million houses. Now, we can create many abodes for people now living in slums, and doing it in such a way. We call these things vertical villages, and I really like that term, because it takes this village character Will has been talking about a lot earlier here. It takes the village character as also basically as a source of social capital. And Jala has a way to turn social capital into credit, and a way out of poverty, basically, and to eliminate poverty actually within one generation, and possibly even sooner. So Yeah, so small businesses, local things, that's kind of what the Jala system grows on, in the sense that it is totally community oriented in the way that the community can actually it's can decide. So it's really easy to build into this system a communication system where you would say where you can crowdsource a credit for a baker, or where you can say, oh, dear city, we need more lampposts in this street. I mean, the communication possibilities coupled with accountability and accounting things really open a whole world of possibility that given and already grown structures don't have like that. Um, from my point of view, we can create a socio-economic system that is truly not even sustainable, resilient. Resilient in the sense that, you know, when the world around really starts to wobble, it still stays stable. That's a resilient system. A resilient system can handle all kinds of disturbances and chaos. And I think this is really what we're building with Global Leisure City. Yeah, I think that's basically what I want to say off the cuff.
Thank you very much, Mushin. I guess there's probably more questions than there are answers. I know Zubi's eagerly wanting to ask a few questions there. So if I can open it up to Zubi.
I just noticed Will wanting to add something to it.
Okay,
Yeah,
Will first, and then I'll pass it on to Zubi.
If I may, just quickly, I've just been Google searching and unbanked. So for people who don't know, unbanked means you don't have documents that a bank will be interested to deal with you. So you don't have a birth certificate or some form of ID. So you can't even go to a bank for a loan. So in Pakistan, the estimates are that 100 million adults are unbanked. They don't have enough ID to approach a bank. So it's a big figure.
That's a population out of a population of 220 million. That's 100 million. So
yeah,
quite a substantial amount.
It is, and I'm not shocked because it's not uncommon. I think, and so you have to understand that by harnessing the bankability of people, by giving them identity, and Jala is the platform that creates identity for people, you harness a part of the economy that is totally opaque to the government. And I'm going to tie this in. So it's the black economy essentially, and I'm going to tie this in. Did you mention about the capacity for Jala to interface with government tax agencies, Mushin?
I just mentioned that. Yeah. By the side.
So the very simple transactional aspect. Every time there's a transaction, small peel could go to the government as in lieu of traditional tax, not in addition to, would be a very efficient system. And then you don't have the capacity for dodging taxes and all the rest of it. Every time there's a transaction, it goes into the cloud, the algorithm does it, there's no people interfering, and the money just slides sideways into the government coffers in recognition that it provides services, and it can be done equitably in a non-usury way, and everyone's happy, and no one has to police whether you're doing your tax or not, because everyone has to transact. You have to exchange things, and Jala forms just the perfect bulletproof system for allowing that to happen. So this is taxation with a smiley face. Don't have to fill in your annual tax returns. It's just automatic. It's not heavy duty because everyone pays it. So there's not big players dodging their tax responsibilities and putting the burden on smaller people. It's equitable, and I kind of like that. The more you transact, the more tax you pay. I think that how fair could that be? I think that works so long as it's not usury or creates havoc for major industry, and it wouldn't. And they need to pay their fair share as well. But these don't have to be big amounts. It just has to be small amounts, equitably spread. That's just really, I think, really important. I really hope that the JALA system can be implemented in a city. Obviously, it would need the approval of the government, and I'd really love to talk to government about how this might work, because as Mushin said, this is just another way that we can be smarter. The sustainability of that system, the fact that it can't be hacked or changed, it just makes sense. If you were to start from scratch, that's what you do. You do a JALA system. You wouldn't create the taxation systems that all countries have. That'd be insane because they're so inefficient. Anyway, that's my two dollars.
Thanks. Xavier, over to you.
Well, as always, I'm amazed, and I am very intrigued also at the same time to know as much as we possibly can about this the complexities of this project. Firstly, I would see if out of our attendants in the conversation today, if they have any questions to ask any one of you gentlemen, and if they do, of course they can ask any time. But as always, I would try to ask some questions just so that people would also get to know more about the concept and the planning behind it. Because in the past few conversations that we've been having in our episodes, previous episodes, we have covered some topics where we discussed JALA in depth and how JALA can make things easier for people to build something out of nothing practically. And then not just to build it out of nothing, but to sustainably continue to empower a family financially, and then build assets as one goes with it, and that too in a very sustainable mechanism and very transparent, independent mechanism by means of the software that Mushin has explained in the previous episode. Now, having said that and having discussed these things, I wanted to know. We have discussed vertical villages, we have discussed food cube, and we have discussed agroforestry, and also town planning in terms of square meter surface area for a family, for minimum surface area for a family unit, in terms of the statistical data that we'll shared last time, and also today we discussed about 300 people, the memory of having 300 names, an instant memory, and 1,200 faces that one generally can keep in the random accessible memory of a brain. Now, are we also thinking on these lines when we talk about this IGLC in a way that this city would also have some sort of smaller areas based on 200, 300 people in a sector or in an area within that city, or is it, or are there things in this particular project which are not relevant to certain items that we've discussed in the past few episodes? Are there certain things that we're adding to this?
Well, no insult is intended here, but I'm pretty sure Pakistanis are human. So it's very relevant, you know, the DNA issues. and they're embedded in the plan that we have at the moment. And so the city is made up of, like a living organism. It has areas with cells and clusters, and so the city is made up of these clusters of clans that surround a village. The village then cluster around to form a township, and then the township surrounds the CBD to make the city. So there are distinct parts of the city, and people will belong to them, and that they'll all be serviced properly. So, like I said, you don't have to move out of a township, which is down from the city. That's because to operate. Yeah. So yeah, most definitely, this is something I'm very keen to make sure works in.
Because the first time when you mentioned this in one of our previous episodes, and the way I got to know about it, the whole concept of how you plan to take it a small village-wise, town-wise, and then gradually building it in the shape of a city where there's a CBD where these people come to, and the whole concept of how these people would we would take them back in the good old days in terms of the concepts, and have the technologies of future available at their doorsteps, inside their homes, and with them. Yeah.
So which football team do you support, Zubi?
Well, I'm a Brazilian fan, to be honest.
I think he's more American.
Raza, you better answer this question.
I'm Manchester United, very much.
Some local team.
Manchester United.
and so which cricket team do you support?
Currently, I don't know. I think I support the Australian cricket team because of their professionalism over the British.
Okay. Well, my point is that it's not an either-or situation. You can be a member of a clan, an extended family group, and you can be a member of a village, and you can be a member of a town, and you can be a member of a city and a country. They're just distinct levels of belonging. You don't have to lose one to be part of another. And the problem with city planning is that people forget that. And so suddenly you're a member of a megalopolis of 1 million people with no barriers between you and the next community. It's just one big fat amoeba, and it's meaningless. But by creating the communities within the townships, within the city, you create meaning for people and community, and they belong. And so the naming of each township and each village is very important. And as is the naming of the city. I think maybe we could even have a competition in Pakistan to open it up to the public to say, what do you think is a good name for this? Because, as much motion as you like this name, we're not going to call it the Islamabad Global Leisure City. It's just too hard to say. So you need something short that rolls off the tongue, like Karachi, or something appropriate.
Yeah. Okay, so I am now thinking that all these beautiful concepts that we've been discussing are all embedded in this bigger picture of the city, and as you mentioned that this city would have self-sustainable activities going on, starting from the very concept of the industry that is required, just like David mentioned, that not just having local products available, but indigenous manufacturing available, so that people can actually, knowing that there's a project coming up which requires construction for at least a year down the lane to get it up and erected in the shape of a town or a city, so they can actually make a business plan within themselves, and the city, the concept of Jala can support them in a way that if I start concrete a plan to start something needed for concrete or for steel structures or wooden structures, or what do I need to start an industry with, and because I already have a market. since the leisure city is supposed to buy this much of, I mean, even David could come up with a plan of thinking how to make a small tender sort of a thing within the Jala structure, that okay, we have these many people in on board Jala. So what we would do is we would announce first that our construction plan would require this much of these items, which can locally be manufactured. So if someone intends to have a small, very small industry within the Jala structure, Jala could probably give them the soft loan that we discussed earlier and put these people together. And this industry could probably start providing certain items for the construction of this city, and then the development or the furnishing and the energy side be it alternate sources of solar or wind, or I don't know. However, gradually these people could, the way I see it, the way I have gathered from your discussions, that having Jala on board and expertise of all sorts in the development side, the development industry, Jala could actually strengthen the concept that David was mentioning of having the locals work for for building the city, in terms of transferring of know-how, of skills that we can bring on from various parts of the world, and teach the citizens of Jala, the unbanked people of Jala, that we give you the skill and the concept of how to do things, and then also to help you build a small cottage industry concept, and then we can say that okay, maybe 30% of the city is built by the people of Jala, or I'm just probably being a bit too optimistic, but say 10-15%. I would see that okay, there's a possibility, and by the time the city is erected and up and available and visible, the people of the city, of the town, are already very developed in terms of capacity and skills, and then just like David mentioned, that not only for the city, then their products and services could start to benefit others and get some sort of a revenue for themselves, for their sustainability, and build them as entrepreneurs, that the way Mushin mentioned in the previous episode, that that these people, if they're given the opportunity, they have ideas, they have concepts of, just like you keep on mentioning that if a baker requires a machine, and Jala can support in getting that bakery equipped with it, then there could be a contractor within the head of that person, but not the favorable circumstances for that person to grow into a contractor, and Jala could then make a contractor out of him, an entrepreneur out of him, or a mason out of him, or a baker out of him, and by the time the city is functional, you have a workforce of your own within the system, trained by your own team and on record of Jala, and looking at a future of 5 to 10 years, which that person could probably not have even conceived of before the inception of the IGLC. So please correct me where I'm wrong, but if this is how whatever I've gathered so far, if this is how one is to see, a Pakistani is to see this project as, then I believe this project needs to not only initiate immediately, but also to be replicated, because when you talk about 100 million unbanked people in Pakistan, that is almost half of the population that you're talking about, and more population than most countries in this world at the moment. So if this is what we're looking at, then we are looking at eradicating not only poverty, but also establishing an identity of a Pakistani citizen in a redefined and refined manner. So when you mention Imran Khan, our prime minister, a couple of times in the conversation, both you gentlemen, I believe this is what any Imran Khan or any prime minister would dream to have in one's tenure. Why? Because these are the concepts which not only wins votes, but also wins hearts, which is the actual sole purpose of the concept of becoming a prime minister or the head of the state, so that they could bring the state out of certain conditions that they're craving for and they're wanting for deep down inside. I mean, I'm talking about honest people. I'm talking about genuine people, and I believe that Imran Khan is one of those genuine people that that us Pakistanis have so far characterized him as. So if these sort of projects come to Pakistan, or even if are addressed and conveyed to the Pakistan government, current government, I believe this is the answer, one of the answers to those questions that we haven't been able to solve for the past 70 odd years now. And this is the revolution, just like Mushin was mentioning that we are revolutionizing the concept of smart cities, and it's not just like you said, the way the humorous aspect of that it's the infrastructure and people would handle it smartly, and that is the key, that is the answer to these questions. But having said all that, do you think, now I'm talking about talking as a Pakistani who's anxiously waiting for this project to land in the country, do you think when you are thinking and composing these sort of ideas and projects and working day and night on paper and in meetings and getting these things done and approved within the team and within the company and within the group of companies, do you think do you foresee problems, be it political problems, be it financial problems, be it the local atmosphere, just like David was mentioning that we have to know the area that we are going to before actually going there, just like his experience in India. It is, yes, we can say it is different, but it's quite similar to what what you would face in Pakistan. There is, of course, a bit of difference, but so do you see problems? Do you see issues before bringing this project to Pakistan?
I think, firstly, if I may, part of our thought process was the Imran Khan factor. You know, when the timing of our project and putting the project together, bringing the team together, was driven by Prime Minister Khan coming into office. As you're aware, I've been traveling back and forth to Pakistan for decades now. And why haven't I initiated something previously?
Yes.
I just felt uncomfortable dealing with previous establishments, dealing with previous governments, ministers, because of, to mention a word, corruption. And I just felt this was the time that it needed to happen. And I wasn't alone in this. You know, there's so many Pakistani diaspora who are all over the world have started this movement back to Pakistan. And there must be some reason behind this. You know, Prime Minister Khan, I've interacted with him, and the guy is genuine. You know, what he wants to do for the country comes from the heart. And that was part of our thinking process behind collecting everybody. Secondly, any project of this magnitude will have problems. You know, we know that there will be problems. Problems are there to be solved. You know, the challenges will be there and we'll deal with them, but we are entering this with our eyes open and putting together as strong team as possible, both locally as well as globally, who we can call upon to address these challenges. We met with the British ambassador in Pakistan last year. I was very encouraged by his whole attitude towards Pakistan. He's very pro-Pakistani. You know, he's not one of the diplomats that goes and hides away in the embassy and you don't hear from him. as you are aware, and the rest of the audience is aware, he's active. He goes up and down the length of the country, and he promotes. Yes, it's the British interest, and that's part of his role. But you know, for somebody of that caliber to be that pro-Pakistani and be proactive, I think it's a very encouraging sign. And previously, the German ambassador that was there, likewise, you know, he had the same attitude. I interact with Pakistanis all over the place, you know, whether it's here in the UK or whether it's in the US. And there are some very positive signs that are coming from people. And these are all, you know, it gives encouragement that, you know, that the timing is right for such an initiative to be heading back to Pakistan.
Raza, just to build on that, I'd absolutely endorse and agree with what you've said. My experience, I mentioned India earlier, but also Russia, Brazil, China. I've been involved in building some fairly substantial factories. And the reason they were successful was we had really good local people on the ground. And I wouldn't underestimate the challenge of doing that, because they're not you know, unemployed. The people that we want are the most difficult characters to get, you know, on our payroll or working with us and for us, because they're good people. But in every one of those projects, we made it a real key part of the program to get on the ground, meet people, and make an appointment of some sort to have a local country manager or somebody. And you don't earn trust on day one. But the sooner you can start day one, you can start building the relationship. And I think that's really what Raza was saying there as well. You know, we just need to have a strong team on the ground. That's part of it. And we'll inevitably have all sorts of challenges and issues, but then every project worth doing does. You know, it's how we respond to it and how we react to it. And you know what, sometimes problems and challenges can actually end up in being a benefit and a result. Something that we hadn't planned, once we sort of dig deep into it, you might realize actually it's a real advantage. We might have to change some of our thinking, but it might be a real benefit. So I think, you know, the real answer to that to some extent, Zubi, is we've got the people that are able to analyze those challenges and hopefully find the most expeditious and sensible way around it.
Can I add to that a bit too? Before I do, though, I'd just like to say, Emotion and I have discovered this very clearly, that just because someone's unbanked or a community's unbanked, it doesn't mean there's no economy. In fact, it can be a substantial economy. It's just opaque to authorities. And so don't presume that because someone's unbanked that they're not dealing with money and have an economy. It's totally, that does include the people who are poorer than poor, but there's a big proportion who are, they're fine, they're well off, not maybe super well off, but they've got enough money and it's just not visible to people. So with regards to roadblocks that may occur, you know, one of the biggest things is fear, and people fear what they don't know. And so, Zubi, I've really got to thank you and Raza for this opportunity to be on the Grey Lounge to explain what it is, because when people understand what it is that we're trying to do, and that we're not trying to do it in a harmful way, that it reduces the fear and people will be prepared to come on board. So that's a really primary thing, that your ability to transmit our ideas to the people of Pakistan so broadly, very critical. And then the other thing is that if people with good hearts and the right intention will want to join and be part of this, because they can see that's the intention. This is not marketing. This is like, we're trying to do this good thing. Are you with us? There'll always be people who won't, because we'll be interfering with their world in some way. Their fear is that we'll remove their ability to generate income the way they have been doing it. And so usually it's industrialists or, you know, people of that caliber who are also influential. And sometimes it becomes government, because they're influenced by these influential people in commerce who can create havoc. And so we're not blind or deaf to this. And we don't mean these people harm. And so this is why the next point to ponder on the Grey Lounge is about introduction of new things into communities in such a way that everyone benefits. And so that's the spirit in which we would offer that. And so they're the areas, it's the fear of loss that usually creates problems. And it's very important that we get across this notion, and particularly when we discuss the technologies next week of what goes into the Islamabad Global Leisure City, potentially could be very threatening to people's livelihoods. But the way we're proposing to implement them is quite sophisticated, and I think people would like to hear how that happens, and it'll put a lot of people at rest. We're willing to cooperate and partner with this, and so and I think my final point would be that we're hoping that this is a great model. It'll never be good as the model after this one, because they always get better. But we're hoping that it's the best model that for this sort of thing that will exist at this time. And so we have no fear that people will copy it. In fact, we would encourage that. And so the intellectual property that goes into it, we'd be having open forums to discuss this with local professionals, project managers, architects, city planners, so that everyone is learning in the process. I think it should be as transparent as possible, because you know what? There's so much to be done. It's not funny, and this team can't do it all. We'd be better off helping other people to do it if we're going to have any sort of traction on the planet, particularly when you think that there are 5 million families at the moment who are inappropriately housed. What can we do? That's 83 is Islamabad Global Leisure Cities. I don't think any of us are going to live that long that we could possibly do that many cities. Maybe Motion. Yeah, not sure. You're on mute, Motion.
Yeah, I'm back. The one thing I wanted to pick up on is on this concept of informal economy. I may have mentioned it last time, but I'll mention it again. 60%, according to the International Labour Organization, 60% of the people work and live in the informal sector. 60%. Now, it's here in Western Europe, or in Europe in general, we would call it black economy, right? Because people hide money from the government. But what informal economy really means is we haven't formalized the data. We don't know anything about it. We have no clue. Now, what Jala introduces within this city is really a way to formalize, if you like it. I don't like that particular term, but to turn the informal economy into something that we can look at, and we can see patterns of interaction and so on and so on. And so we may understand business opportunities on the one hand and problems on the other hand much easier, because we have a tool that protects privacy, but at the same time gathers information of this whole informal economy. And like you were saying, we don't just want to decide, we want to have informed decisions which are informed by real data that are realistic. They don't give us a beautiful picture if we want to have one, or an ugly picture if we want to have one, but that gives us what is actually going on. And that in turn will teach us how to actually boost informal economies into where they get this level where they become formal, in the sense that we understand how to tax them, because tax is really the main thing a government is always concerned. How much do we get in? How much can we pay? How much can we borrow on the international market? And I haven't mentioned this here before, but actually we could open a new gate for international financing on a level that is more, that actually takes the informal economy in and offers opportunities to them.
See, no, I'm sorry, but the more Mission talks about these things, the more questions pop up in my head, and I know this is we can save these questions for another episode. But and I think I would do that also. But I want to add one thing when Mission was discussing earlier about the tax part. You know, the biggest problem, I think, what I've noticed so far, that our current government keeps on mentioning in their discussions on mainstream media and programs related to the economy of Pakistan, or whenever the Prime Minister comes and addresses the nation, he keeps on mentioning that as well, is that uh, people over here are not just, and I'm not talking about those who are unbanked. I'm talking about those who are by the, according to the term, banked, but still do not pay taxes in many, I mean, because of many reasons and in many ways. Now, if now let's put them aside and bring our concept here now in discussion. If Jala manages, and if IGLC manages to bring a certain informal economy into a formal state, and then pay a gradual, a very nominal but gradual tax sort of a thing in the next 5 to 10 years, a figure that they know is financially viable in the project, within the project, of how to bring these people on board, and then and get a certain amount of percentage out for the government, just like you mentioned that we would have to, you would have to incorporate a system of such sort where this economy is also giving a certain percentage to the government, for the government to be comfortable with. Otherwise, yeah, you can generate a lot of issues. But if a figure of some sort comes out by your financial experts during the working of your financial a part of the whole concept, this could actually be a very important part to convey to the government that within these many years we will be bringing that part of the black economy or the informal economy into the system, and add this much of percentage into the economy of the country, and also help people formalize their structure, their financial structure, and be proud to pay a certain amount of tax in whatever they earn and whatever they make, or whatever they're investing. Because I've seen the current government failing in convincing people, in bringing people out of this informal side of economy towards the formal side, to help the country. So much so that in the past couple of years, the current government even gave a deadline, announced a deadline throughout the country for all those people who have stacked some money in, invisible or informal money in their kitties, which are not taxed. The government first gave a deadline and then extended the deadline that you can put this unmarked, unaccounted for money into real estate, and the government would give you amnesty. They called it the amnesty policy, under which the government was not going to ask about any money trail of the investment that you have brought into the system, and made it visible or formal. And people put a lot of money into the real estate industry in Pakistan, as I mentioned earlier, that the only sustainable and reliable side of the business industry in Pakistan currently is the real estate industry. So people did get encouraged by the government, and they did bring their funds into the system. probably not up to the level of expectations that Imran Khan had, and because of which he had to even extend the deadline a bit further. But it didn't really reflect the way they assumed it to. But this way, the way you are trying to bring an informal magnitude of economy into the formal side for a government like Pakistan, this could be a very good selling point for the government to play its part and roll down its red carpets for your company or your project to come in. That okay, because what you are doing is what the government failed to do in the past 3 years in terms of bringing people into the formal side to pay taxes.
Question?
Yeah, I can respond to that just very shortly because I think we're nearing the end. But it said there's 100 million people unbanked in Pakistan, which basically means they pay zero tax, probably, most likely. Now, if we did get these 100 million people to pay $10 taxes per year, we have $1 billion
Yeah,
per
that's
year.
I'm
Per
sure
year.
that's
So,
more than the actual taxes that they managed to get currently out of
yeah.
people.
So it's like all governments, they don't really think of the people as people and so on. So yeah, of course, and so yeah, take that in. I mean, 100. If we get a Jala card or a ID system working for these 100 million unbanked in Pakistan, I mean, I would even think it would be more that we will surface for the government, really
Yes,
much more, actually. I'm more thinking in the 10 billion ballpark. But, you know, anyway, that's a lot of money, which can be, and for the people paying these taxes is very, very, very painless because you spend $10, you don't miss the 10 cents that goes, immediately into the government's coffers. But the government getting that from 100 million people, that's something different, right? So, so yes, I mean, there's another aspect of all of this is the International Monetary Fund is really putting pressure on Pakistan all of the time to follow their economic diktat, basically. And there's other ways to get money internationally than through the International Monetary Fund. But it's not controlled, and it's hard to control that. We can make that controllable. So actually, in a way, we're creating a system for the Pakistani government to renovate, or I don't want to say revolutionize, but to renovate their tax system in such a way that it works for everybody, especially for the government. And
Can,
investments will come in easier. So yeah, enough said.
Mohsin, can you speak to the point that the Jala exchange system is as secure in terms of personal data as exchanging cash? Because I think
Yeah,
people would be concerned about privacy and yeah.
well, so far, people have not been able to crack Bitcoin, to hack into Bitcoin. What they have been able to is to hack into big exchanges. And they have been able to hack into big exchanges and siphon off. I think the North Korean are really the masters of that universe. Siphon off money, crypto money. Uh, they take money away from the person. It's like going electronically into the bank and having a pipeline. So that's how they do it. But that's only possible because you have a centralized data bank. Now, what Jala is using is you are the only and sole source of your data and the only owner of your personal data, privacy. all we need to know in an exchange often is simply that it's actually you and you have a right to do this. So that's what that's how we get an identity. So a system that is decentralized basically lives of handshakes between two partners in an interaction. So here is how that works basically. Very simple. People from the old age of the internet may remember a modem. You put your phone on it and it goes, you hear all these sounds, and that was called the handshake. Basically, it is one system saying the other system, I am this and I am so and so, and I speak this and this language. And then the modem says answers to that. Now, this whole concept can work equally well in an exchange. Exchanges with money are anonymous because the money doesn't have a trace. It doesn't have printed on it, oh, Mushin used me, right? So, so this is what we need to do in this world. Now that's next to impossible because like you spend a Bitcoin on a beer and it goes up into the huge Bitcoin ledger and then comes back to you. Now, you don't need that centralization point. We just need, so I have my little app basically that interacts with your app. That's, I think, the best way to explain it. So your app says, hello, how are you? And my app says, I'm Mushin's app, and I'm always fine because I'm Mushin's app. Anyway, so these two applications interact, but what next they do, and this is important because everybody has a different ledger. So you have your ledger on your app. Now, then my ledger said, let's say we have an interaction worth $100. Then my app asks your app, do you have 100 credit? And your app says, yes. And then my app says, oh, let me check that. So my app actually looks into your ledger and sees the history of your interactions. I don't see it, my app sees it, right? And then it sees, this is bona fide, right? This is a person that has always acted good. So then it sees, okay, what is on this, the $100 here are really valid $100 and I can use them. Now, a bad actor in that system, there's what we call a whisper function. Basically, if my app discovers that your app is not bona fide, it will just reject the interaction with you, but also it will tell all the 10, 15, 20, 100 people around me that, hey, when you interact with this guy's app, be careful, really check it. That's all what it, so that's all it, so it's kind of self-policing. So that particular part is self-policing. Now, so the safety really comes from two innovations that the system that we're using has. One is all your data is only on your computer or mobile. But since we may want to interact while you're not online, there is a couple of copies of your data, kind of mixed with saved with hashtags. So that is basically the way a decentralized system can do without a centralized database that would make the system weak. And so and that in itself basically really what two apps are exchanging is promises, right? And then checking the promises, are these promises good or not? And then rejecting or accepting the promise on those on ground of those data. without basically doing away with. And it gets very technical, and we can get into those zips, but
I think
basically
that's sufficient for the time being there, Mushin. Gentlemen, I must try and wrap this up. I
Yes.
know that the guys have the commitments and need to get off. But once again, thank you very much for your valuable time. Great insight into what we're trying to do. Next week's program is fascinating. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to be discussing about some of the technologies and the latest cutting edge technologies that we have and we are currently working with. Zubi, if you just wrap things up from your side and
Yes.
close off for today.
Yes, thank you very much, all of you gentlemen, for your time. And yes, there are certain questions that popped up in my head, and I'm sure all those listeners who are part of this conversation and through our channel would also have questions in their minds. So what we would do is, because the next episode, as Will mentioned, is going to be very interesting, because we're talking about threatening technologies, threatening to other existing technologies and companies and people behind them. So so that episode could have questions related to Jala as well. Just a quick one or two questions we would try to bring in the next episode. And also maybe a quick 10 to 15 minute session of question and answers, where we could also address questions coming from other people. And but I would request that this program today was so interesting for me, and I'm sure for everybody in Pakistan, that we would also elaborate this project a bit further in the coming days, and probably in the episode after the one coming up next, so that people will get to know a bit more about it. Just like Will mentioned, that the fear element and the fear factor of it goes away when people actually get to know that what this project can do for them and for the country. So maybe we could have another session on this project after the session next week, and have people on board who can ask questions and discuss this in detail, so that they would get to know more about what this project has in store for a Pakistani citizen and people of Pakistan. But I thank you all very much on behalf of Grey Lounge and myself, and for your time also, and for your for the ideas that you bring, and for the room you have for me to question, put my questions in front. I'm really thinking about Fred not having to shed much of his light and wisdom this time around, but I hope in the next episode we would get to hear more from Fred and benefit from his side of the story as well. But
it's
still,
only if Raza allows me.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure.
Well, Fred, who am I to stop you?
So I thank you all very
Oh,
much.
it's happy birthday to Fred, by the way. It was his birthday yesterday, so big happy birthday to
Oh, happy birthday, Fred.
And to David.
Happy birthday.
And to David.
Oh, happy birthday, David.
Oh, wonderful.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, gentlemen. And what a good day to have your birthdays, because of the Valentine's Day as well.
I am well loved as well as being blessed.
So I thank you all very much, and until next Tuesday. I mean, I have a lot of questions that are coming up in my head that I would formulate, and the next topic is interesting enough for me to also have some homework before that, and probably even bring some people from related to IT in Pakistan, so they could also ask certain questions to benefit from your plan, your concepts, and your projects.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Jez. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.